California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Mike Gardner. He is a member of the Riverside City Council, but he's also on the California Seismic Safety Commission. And sir, we all saw this headline, 6.0 quake rattles the Bay Area. It was a scary time, no doubt. The pictures were a bit daunting. What can you tell us about this earthquake?
Well, several things. Napa is an older city, and particularly in its downtown, it has a lot of unreinforced masonry buildings, and those are susceptible to collapse in heavy shaking.
And let's talk about that, because that is a very significant issue. And you have been speaking with me about it for years, this whole notion of unreinforced masonry. I mean, in fact, the sub-headline is even some retrofits are unsafe. So those are the reinforced masonry, but like you said, there was unreinforced masonry.
There was, and there are measures that can be taken to make them more resistant to shaking, but no building is impervious to shaking. That's one of the things that I think we can learn from this earthquake, and I hope that my commission will look at it, is how differently did retrofitted buildings behave than non-retrofitted buildings? There's not been a good study of that.
What about wood frame buildings? We know in the 1994 Northridge earthquake, some of those had some real problems.
Those were mostly buildings, they call it soft story, where you have a more open area, typically parking, below regular construction with rooms. Those have problems. I don't think there are a lot in Napa. I haven't heard any information about how those buildings performed in Napa. But wood frame in general, most single-family homes, 1- and 2-story homes, actually fare quite well in earthquakes.
I want to talk about the early warning system. We know that in the community of Berkeley, they actually have an early warning system. And in that community, they received about a 10-second warning that the earthquake was about to hit. After the earthquake, I got a flood of press releases from members of Congress, members of the Senate about, look, here's an example of how early warning could work. Where are we on early warning? We've been talking about this as well. We know Japan has it, Mexico City has it, I think.
California,
we don't have it.
Well, California is in the process of developing it. There are 2 demonstration projects, one in Southern California that's centered at Caltech, and then one in Northern California centered at UC Berkeley.
Right.
And that's the one that got the warning, the 10-second warning. As it happened, because in the overall scheme of things, this was not a great big earthquake.
Right.
Yes, there was a 10-second warning in Berkeley, but it didn't really make any difference in Berkeley because the shaking was mild there because of the distance.
But what's interesting is, let's say there's an earthquake in the San Andreas.
Yes.
Which could be devastating.
Absolutely.
If it's in the southern San Andreas, the warning to the Los Angeles region would be about 45 or 60 seconds.
Yes.
Even with a large earthquake. I mean, 10 seconds.
Yeah, here locally in the Inland Empire, you can get 30 to 45-second warning, especially if it starts in the extreme southern end of the San Andreas, which many people think is a very likely place. So you get up to a minute in Los Angeles. That's a huge amount of time to do things that will save lives and reduce post-earthquake damage. It's not going to save buildings at all, but you can stop elevators, you can open fire department doors, you can stop trains, those sorts of things. In a home or a business, you can turn off the stove or other ignition sources, because one of the biggest damaging impacts of big earthquakes is the fires that inevitably follow.
And that's what we learned from Napa.
Yes.
Most of the damage post-earthquake was fire-related.
Yes.
What I wonder is, we know that a big one is coming, not only because they come every 100 or 150 years, but because we haven't seen one in 300 years.
Yes.
And so we're way overdue. I believe that the cost of the early warning system would be $80 million. Is that right, sir?
That's the estimate.
Look, $80 million is a lot of money, but in a budget in California of over $100 billion,
It's pretty small.
I mean, that's like 0.1%. What is it? I don't know the math. I don't do the math that way. It's a very small amount.
It is.
0.1%, I think, less.
Where we are at this point, the Governor's Office of Emergency Services is leading the effort in putting together and finding funding for the earthquake early warning system in California. And I think in the next year, we will have funding identified and we'll begin putting the system together. There are issues with early warning systems. An example would be if you got a warning in Berkeley and you started taking significant actions as precautions from the Napa earthquake, after a while people stop responding correctly if it turns out to be a false alarm as far as they're concerned. So
but would there be false alarms? I mean,
there
are
can
they
be.
all
There can
in
be
Japan,
yes.
Mexico?
Yeah, in Japan they have a very high false alarm rate to the point that the high-speed rail system in Japan has its own system because it doesn't trust the government's system.
Wow.
So false alarms are a concern, and that's part of what we have to put together in California's system is when do you send an alert to people? How do you design a system that can say this is a really big earthquake and the shaking in that location is going to be so significant that people need to take action? And that's not an easy thing to do. So that's really where we are, and part of why California hasn't had one for some time. Building the system itself is not that hard. Getting it to work correctly so that it doesn't unnecessarily scare people, and if you start shutting off gas mains and things like that, everybody's pilot lights go out, and most of us can't relight our pilot lights.
Oh, I know.
So I mean, there are a series of impacts that come with an alert. And you need to build a system that only sends real alerts when there is a real danger. And that's what the holdup in California has been, and that's what we're working on now. I think we'll get there, though.
When you think about Napa, the first thing you think about is wine.
Yes.
And we saw the barrels that tumbled over in Napa. And, of course, the most important thing is saving lives and minimizing injuries. Right. But having the wine industry impacted in Napa is an economic detriment.
It is.
And you think about other regions in California, San Luis Obispo County, here in Riverside County, in Temecula, Murrieta. What is that industry doing to protect itself? Because look, I mean, it is an economic driver.
There's no question. It really is an economic decision for each individual business. It's not a regulated.
Okay. Should it be?
I would argue probably not, because the likelihood of an earthquake happening at any given time is low.
Sure.
But if you look at what different wineries have done, some of the Temecula wineries have anchored their barrels. They're on racks and they're anchored to the ground. Others have not. We'll see what happens when we do get a damaging earthquake in the Temecula area. It will happen someday.
And then there's the question of water. We know that if there's a significant earthquake in Northern California, the Delta could bust and we could be without water in Southern California for months.
Yes.
Are we taking this seriously?
Yeah, I think actually Southern California is in pretty good shape from that perspective. Over the last 15 years or so, the focus has been on additional storage. For example, we have Diamond Valley Lake over by Hemet.
And we know there's a water bond on the ballot come November, and that provides almost $3 billion for additional storage.
Yes. So, in fact, at the moment, in the drought we're in, there's more water available in Southern California that came from Northern California than there is in Northern California.
His name is Mike Gardner. He is a member of the Riverside City Council. He is also a member of California's Seismic Safety Commission. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is California Edition.